Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Mike Beer, kicking off a pick five at Santa Anita on Saturday. It's a huge afternoon of racing with preps for the Breeders' Cup. And race number 6 is the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. It's a 200 grander, a grade 2 going 3/4 of a mile. Let's take a look at this field. Dr. Seibel is 9-5 on the morning line. And this guy, he's very admirable, Mike. He won the Del Mar Futurity at 2. He won the Bing Crosby at 3. He won the Santa Anita Sprint at 3. He took one of the worst Breeders' Cup Sprint beats of all time that year as well. And he's come back at the age of 5 despite his various ailments, and it looks like he can still run.
Yeah, it certainly looked pretty good coming back off that really, really long layoff earlier this year, Dan, with a big figure defeating allowance horses. His 2 races since then, I feel like you just want to be a little bit lenient on him. We're going to take a look at his most recent start in a little bit there. You know, you can debate whether or not he maybe hung a little bit in that race, but he still ran fine.
Bob Baffert has 3-year-olds in this race. Arabian Lion and Fort Bragg, who might have been compromised by a wet track at Saratoga last time out, and then the intriguing Speedboat Beach, who has only raced once on dirt with a 104 Beyer speed figure. All 3 of those horses has speed. Let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector. Dr. Seibel does have speed, but he also can win from off of it. Arabian Lion, when he's at his best, can get close, but something tells me this Speedboat Beach is going.
Yeah, he probably is. He's a real wild card in this race, Dan. I mean, who really knows what you're going to get from this horse? It's, if nothing else, it's very interesting placement by Baffert with this horse, making his 3-year-old debut off of a long layoff. But I agree with you. I think if he's running in this race, he's showing speed from the gate.
I think a horse that might get a nice setup in here is the number 1 American Theorem. You note that the pace is expected to be fast, and I have a feeling American Theorem is slowly racing himself back into shape for these races in the fall. This race, and of course the big one, the Breeders' Cup Sprint. He's only had 2 runs this year. His last start, the Bing Crosby, I just don't think things really worked out for him in that start. He probably has to take a slight step forward, but we saw races last summer that showed he could.
His good race makes him really, really tough in here. We'll see if he runs it in this spot. That I agree with you. The pace feels like it's going to be there for him. That's a big advantage. He had a little bit of maybe deceptive trouble last time in that grade 1 Bing Crosby. There was a horse sort of pulling up on the turn right in front of him. He was the horse most affected by it, American Theorem. I still thought he put in a pretty nice run into that race after the trouble. So maybe that performance is a little bit better than it looks.
Dr. Seibel came off the long layoff, as Mike mentioned, looked very good dusting off allowance horses. They tried the Met Mile, and he was really close to a fast pace that day, and the distance was too much, Cody's Wish was too much, the setup was too much, the ship was too much. He came back in the Bing Crosby last time out, and he did better. He was hung very wide on the second turn and into the stretch, and as you see, he got a giant look at this, Mike, but he's lost some ground, and he's going to end up falling short, finishing 3rd to the razor sharp, the Chosen Vron, and Anarchist, a horse that came back to win.
Yeah, 2 good horses to his inside. And you're right, he was on the outside all the way in here. It still felt like he was going to win this race past mid-stretch, Dan, and he just sort of didn't quite get there. I'm probably being a little too hard on him. I was a little disappointed that he didn't get the job done there. But obviously, his good race, it makes him super, super tough in here. He doesn't need to be, right on the lead to be effective either. So if this pace is too fast, if it winds up being really fast, he doesn't have to be compromised by it.
The 3 Arabian Lion to me is one of those enigma wrapped in a riddle horses. His career debut sprinting was very, very good. Then it looked like he just wasn't going to pan out at all. A couple of real lousy efforts. But then he got back in form with a good try in the Lexington. He ran a giant number in the Sir Barton against a terrible field. He ran really well in the Woody Stevens with a good trip. And last time out in the Alan Jerkins, it was a wet track. Maybe you just simply give him that excuse. He didn't run well.
No, I didn't. And listen, that was also a very fast pace in that race, so maybe that worked against him. Also, I don't know, Dan. I don't know what to do with this horse. I never liked him. I didn't like any of his races as a 2-year-old, even when it sort of looked like he got good over the summer with those 2 big figure races. I still wasn't sold on him. So for me, I wasn't that surprised that he didn't run that well in the Jerkins last time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just totally wrong about him, and he'll be really, really tough in here. But I don't like this horse.
Fort Bragg came back for Baffert after being yachteened over the spring. He ran in the Dwyer, and that Dwyer's looking a lot better now that Saudi Crown, the horse that Fort Bragg outdueled to the wire, came back and won the Pennsylvania Derby the other day. Now, in the Jerkins, he seemed very cold on the tote board for a horse that just popped a 106 Beyer speed figure against a horse that almost beat Forte in the Jim Dandy. He just looked sluggish from the start. He didn't break. He never seemed to be traveling comfortably. Maybe it was the wet track. Now they're going to cut him back to 6. And I think the question is it going to be too sharp for him if they really cook early?
I kind of worry about that myself, but man, those two one-turn miles, 2 and 3 starts back, those were legit paces, and he was not compromised. He was not outrun by them. I kind of feel like that makes me think that he can get the slight cutback here to 6. And I'd just be willing to be way more forgiving of his Jerkins performance than I would his stablemates. I mean, I think there are plenty of excuses for this horse. He didn't really show up at all. And I just, overall, I just like him a lot more as a horse. I think this horse is really talented. I think he's a dangerous horse in here.
The 5 Visitant is a synthetic super horse. He's won 11 of 15 on the all-weather. The problem is this race is on dirt. He's going to be making the turf to dirt move for trainer Peter Miller. While he shows tactical speed in longer distance races, I just have a feeling he's going to be outrun. He has run well sprinting, but it's on the all-weather. 8-1 on the morning line against this kind of field does seem a little bit light, even with those plethora of triple-digit buyers staring you in the face. He does have that one good race in the Ali Sheba on dirt a while back.
I think he's actually interesting in this race, just for that reason, Dan. I mean, I get it. He's never won on dirt before. There are a couple of really good dirt performances on his card, though, including that Ali Sheba where he ran the 100 Beyer, finishing second. And those races are going long. I mean, when you start to take his form apart and you look at his really good all-weather races, they're the sprint races. I think this horse is a sprinter, and they've never really sprinted him on the dirt. Second off the layoff here, switching back over with some fast races on his card. I think he's interested in him.
And an interesting prep in the Del Mar Mile, sort of a race that fell apart a little bit late. Visitant was up close, pushing the pace. CZ Rocket is up next. We know where he's going to be in the early part of this race. It's going to be out the back door. He's hoping for a fast pace. He's hoping to kick, and he's maybe hoping that Father Time isn't starting to affect him a bit. Here's his most recent start, the Pat O'Brien. He's going to come with a wide bid, as he usually does. He's going to end up finishing a good third. This is a guy that ran second in the Breeders' Cup Sprint in 2022. He was second in the Breeders' Cup Sprint in 2020. He's just a horse you like to root for, but you have to wonder if at this point in his career he needs a lot of things to go his way.
Yeah, I think he's clearly lost a step along the way here. He's just sort of grinding in that race there, Dan, and getting out finished for second from behind, which I didn't think was a great sign for him. Listen, your other point was well taken. He's just going to sit back and try to make one run in here. The pace could be fast in front of him. He was in this race last year. He missed by a nose, another race where they went in front of him. The pace was contested. It set up the right way for him, and he ran.
Sir Atticus, the number 7, very lightly raced. You could argue he still has a lot of upside potential. He won 2 in a row before being jumped up in class in the Pat O'Brien. Could you find an excuse for him that day? The pace was pretty fast and he was close to it, but I just wanted to see a little more pop in the stretch.
Yeah, me too. It felt like it was a pretty good test for him in the Pat O'Brien. I didn't necessarily feel like he passed it necessarily. He didn't run, terribly, but he didn't run as well as I would have liked to have seen him run. And so I didn't really want to bet him back in this race, but he's so lightly raced down. He's got a little bit of talent.
And there's the X factor in the race. This is Speedboat Beach's one and only dirt start to date. It's a maiden special going 5.5 at Del Mar. He went right to the lead. He wins. It's a 104 Beyer speed figure. You have a Baffert 2-year-old that wins with a 104 first time out. You're thinking he's going to the American Pharoah. He's going to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. They're thinking classics. Well, no. Speedboat Beach then went to the turf, and he's done well on the turf. He's proven Baffert right. Stakes winner sprinting, stakes winner going a mile. I just thought it was a big red flag that they moved him off the dirt in the first place, but he's obviously fast, and here he is with the typical Baffert quick works.
Yeah, I really can't think of any way to spin it positively, Dan, that he ran that race that we just watched first time out, a new track record at Del Mar with a 104 Beyer, and he hasn't been on dirt again since then for Baffert. None of that makes sense to me. I got to take it as a bad sign for this horse. He's now off of a layoff first time out as a 3-year-old, and he comes back in this race to make his first start on dirt since that debut. I don't know. That stuff makes him interesting to me, but I could never bet him in here.
I like the job that the connections did with the 9 Spirit of McKenna. This is a horse that's obviously had his share of problems. He didn't make his debut till the summer of his 4-year-old campaign, but he's always shown talent from the start, and they found some really nice spots for him. The San Carlos, the Triple Bend. Granted, those were not the toughest fields in the world. Basically, carbon copy races, just sitting off the pace setter Forbidden Kingdom both times and running by that overmatched horse. His 2 subsequent starts, is it a sign that he's been exposed and that he just hasn't improved as the class has gotten tougher? Or could you say that Bing Crosby, he had a legitimate excuse? There was a lot of
Yeah.
traffic in that race. And then last time out in the Pat O'Brien, maybe he just moved too early into that fast pace.
Yeah, maybe he did. I mean, I'm more forgiving of the most recent start, Dan. I don't know. I still didn't think that he ran that. I wanted to see. I don't want to say that he didn't have an excuse there. I just wanted to see him run better in that race. I don't know. I'm a little concerned now that those last 2 starts, they were the real test for him, and he didn't really pass either one. I still like him as a horse. I still think he's pretty good. He can win this race for sure, but I'm probably not going to bet him. I want to bet somebody else.
He draws outside. There's going to be some speed in front of him. I can see him maybe cruising up with an outside bid on the turn, but he's going to have to sustain it against a good field. Let's take a look at our top picks for the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. I like where you're going in here, Mike. American Theorem's got plenty of back class. I just get the feeling he might be rounding himself back into form come Breeders' Cup time. He should get a setup.
Yeah, the race is supposed to set up the right way for him. And I do think he ran maybe deceptively well in the Bing Crosby last time with a little bit of trouble. He needs a clean trip. He's got that running style where he's just going to sort of be at the back and trying to make a run into it. So he's going to need a clean trip. But I think if he gets one, he can fire a good shot in here.
I think the doctor will be in. I don't think he's going to be cooked by the pace, as Timeform US might suggest. I think he's going to let the other speeds go, tuck inside, and maybe hope for a clear run in the stretch. He's an honest horse that's dropped some tough decisions. I'd like to see him win another biggie. 1254 for Mike, 2834 for me in the Santa Anita Sprint on a big Saturday afternoon at the Great Race Place. Best of luck.